Did you know that some of the greatest technological achievements in human history are mysteries we still cannot solve? Imagine standing before a Roman monument that has endured 2,000 years of weathering, or holding a blade forged with techniques lost to time. Techniques that modern metallurgists, with all their electron microscopes and computer simulations, cannot recreate. Today, I'll reveal the 15 most enigmatic ancient technologies that have humbled modern science. Techniques so sophisticated that despite our advanced laboratories and AI-driven research, we can only marvel at what our ancestors achieved. These aren't primitive tools or lucky accidents. They're masterworks of engineering, chemistry, and intuition that speak to knowledge systems we may have lost forever. Stay to the end, because number one is a technology so advanced, so impossibly precise, that modern scientists are only now beginning to suspect it might have required knowledge we don't believe ancient civilizations possessed. Let's begin. Number 15. Khmer hydraulic engineering. Picture a medieval city housing nearly 1 million people, larger than any European city of its era, sustained through the most sophisticated water management system of the pre-industrial world. The Khmer Empire built over 1,000 square kilometers of hydraulic infrastructure. Massive reservoirs called barrages, networks of canals with precision grades that modern surveyors struggle to match. Distribution systems providing year-round irrigation. The West Barrage alone holds 50 million cubic meters of water. The engineering demonstrates impossible knowledge. Canals maintain grades of exactly 0.1%, 1 meter drop per kilometer, optimal for moving water without erosion or silting. How did Khmer engineers measure such precision over kilometers using only wooden surveying tools? The system integrated multiple reservoirs into a network that recycled water through northern barrages, rice fields, southern barrages, maximizing every drop. Yet it had a fatal flaw. It required constant, centralized maintenance. When the empire weakened in the 15th century, the system collapsed in cascading failure. Within a century, the jungle reclaimed everything. The knowledge of how it worked vanished so completely that archaeologists didn't recognize the true marvel until aerial photography revealed the scope. That's Khmer hydraulic engineering. 1 million people sustained by water, managed with sophistication rivaling modern systems, knowledge that died with the empire. Number 14. Flexible Roman glass. According to multiple ancient accounts, a craftsman once presented Emperor Tiberius with a glass vessel, then threw it to the floor, where it dented instead of shattering. The glass bent like metal, absorbing impact. The craftsman hammered out the dent and handed the restored vessel to the emperor. Tiberius's response? He had the craftsman executed and his workshop destroyed, fearing unbreakable glass would devalue the empire's gold reserves. Pliny the Elder, Petronius, and Dio Cassius all mention this vitrum flexile, flexible glass, in independent sources. Modern materials, science says this shouldn't be possible. Glass is brittle. When stressed beyond its elastic limit, it shatters catastrophically. Yet contemporary researchers have discovered metallic glasses and certain borosilicate compositions that exhibit pseudoplastic behavior under specific conditions. The detail about the emperor's response makes the story credible. Tiberius's fear reflects genuine economic logic. An emperor concerned with monetary stability might genuinely view unbreakable glass as a threat. The craftsman was killed not because he failed, but because he succeeded too well. That's vitrum flexile, an innovation so threatening it was murdered, and a reminder that progress can be deliberately halted when it conflicts with power. Number 13. Mayan blue pigment. Imagine a color painted on Mayan murals 1,500 years ago, still brilliant today despite tropical humidity and acid rain, while other ancient pigments have faded to ghosts. Maya blue combines plant-derived indigo with palygorskite clay in a way that creates a chemical bond so stable that modern chemists didn't understand it until the 1960s, and even now cannot perfectly replicate its durability. The Mayans heated the mixture to 150 to 200 degrees Celsius, just hot enough for indigo molecules to enter and bond within the clay's microscopic channels, creating a nanocomposite where the dye is physically trapped and chemically protected. This temperature range is critical. Too cool, and it fails. Too hot, and the indigo breaks down. How did they maintain this precise range without thermometers in open fires? The durability shocks modern scientists. Maya blue resists nitric acid, which destroys most pigments. It doesn't fade under UV radiation. Laboratory tests show minimal color change after the equivalent of centuries of weathering. Modern synthetic indigo fades within decades. Maya blue has outlasted civilizations. That's Maya blue, nanotechnology from a culture without electron microscopes, a color that outlasts empires. Number 12. Japanese samurai swords. Watch a master swordsmith fold steel in a traditional forge. The process repeated dozens of times until crude tamahagane becomes a blade of impossible sharpness and resilience. A sword that can cut through lesser weapons yet bend without breaking. This is Nihonto, a process so complex that even modern metallurgists cannot fully explain why these blades achieve properties that shouldn't coexist. The swordsmith must sort steel by eye, judging which sections are harder for the edge, which softer for the spine. Then comes folding. 15 folds creates 32,768 layers, homogenizing carbon and removing impurities. But fold too much, and carbon burns out. Too little and weak spots remain. The master knows when to stop by feeling how steel moves under the hammer. The true secret lies in differential hardening. The smith coats the blade with clay, thick on the spine, thin on the edge. When heated and quenched, the thin-coated edge forms ultra-hard martensite, while the thick-coated spine stays flexible. The same steel now has two different molecular structures. The differential cooling also creates the blade's curve. The sword shapes itself through physics. That's Nihonto, steel that transforms itself. Blades that embody paradox, proof that sophistication requires surrender to intuition, refined over lifetimes. Number 11. Roman surgical instruments. Open a Roman surgical kit from the 2nd century CE and find instruments so sophisticated they wouldn't look out of place in a modern operating theater. Scalpels with interchangeable blades, bone drills identical to modern surgical drills, catheters, forceps, vaginal speculums, over 200 specialized tools. For 1,500 years after Rome fell, European surgery regressed to crude cutting and prayers. The vaginal speculum found at Pompeii is particularly remarkable, a bronze instrument with a screw mechanism allowing gradual controlled dilation, essentially identical to the Sims speculum invented in the 19th century. Roman physicians understood that sudden examination caused trauma. Their design allowed gentle opening with precision. Roman military surgeons performed amputations routinely, their kits reflecting this reality. Tourniquets, curved needles for suturing vessels, arterial clamps. They understood principles medieval Europe forgot: keeping instruments clean, using anesthesia, immediate cauterization, specialized training. When Rome collapsed, Systematic medical training disappeared. Medieval Europe spent centuries in surgical darkness. Even after Roman tools were excavated in the 19th century, historians refused to believe they were genuine, assuming they were ritual objects because ancient physicians couldn't possibly have performed procedures that modern surgeons were just mastering. That's Roman surgical instruments, precision medicine from an empire that understood anatomy. Evidence that medical progress isn't inevitable. Number 10. Archimedes' heat ray. According to ancient historians, during the siege of Syracuse in 214 BCE, Archimedes defended his city using mirrors that focused sunlight into devastating beams. Roman galleys suddenly bursting into flame as if touched by divine fire. For 2 millennia, historians dismissed this as legend. Then modern experimenters began testing the physics and discovered it might actually work. In 1973, Greek engineer Ioannis Sakis used 70 copper-coated mirrors to focus sunlight on a wooden boat 160 feet away and set it ablaze within minutes. MIT students in 2005 replicated the experiment. Yet other attempts have failed, leading researchers to conclude the ship would need perfect conditions unlikely in combat. What makes this fascinating isn't whether it existed as described, but that it could have existed. The physics is sound. Archimedes was demonstrably brilliant. His catapults and defensive machines definitely devastated Roman forces. Why not mirrors? When Syracuse fell in 212 BCE, Archimedes was killed by a Roman soldier while drawing geometric figures. So absorbed in mathematics, he didn't notice the invasion. His writings on the burning mirrors, if they existed, were lost with the Library of Alexandria. That's Archimedes' heat ray, a weapon that might have been physics wrapped in mirrors and sunlight. Proof that brilliant minds can weaponize anything, even light itself. Number 9. Iron Pillar of Delhi. Stand before a 23-foot column of iron weighing over 6 tons, forged around 400 CE, that has stood outdoors for 1,600 years without rusting. No comparable corrosion resistance existed until modern stainless steel was developed in the early 20th century. Yet this ancient column has weathered monsoons and pollution with barely a trace of rust. Modern analysis reveals the iron contains unusually high phosphorus, around 1%, which has formed a protective crystalline layer. But creating 6 tons of iron with such uniform phosphorus content in the 5th century requires impossible precision. The pillar appears forge-welded from perhaps 100 to 150 individual blooms, each heated to 1,200 to 1,300 degrees Celsius and hammered together, their boundaries vanishing into solid mass. Each piece needed similar phosphorus levels, otherwise the protective coating would be inconsistent. The forging required enormous bellows, multiple smiths in precise coordination, and sophisticated understanding of iron chemistry. Recognizing that certain ores produced protective properties, even without knowing about phosphorus. Scientists haven't found comparable iron pillars elsewhere. No experiments, no smaller versions, no evidence of the learning process. The Delhi pillar stands alone, as if it appeared fully formed, perfect on the first attempt. That's the Iron Pillar of Delhi, rust-proof iron from an age that should have produced only crude metal, a monument to lost metallurgical mastery. Number 8. Ulfberht swords. Picture a Viking warrior holding a blade marked plus VLFBERH plus T dash a sword that shouldn't exist. It's made from crucible steel so pure, so uniformly distributed, that it requires processes that wouldn't be developed in Europe for another 800 years. These swords contain nearly 3 times the carbon of contemporary European weapons, with almost no slag, chemically identical to modern high-grade tool steel. Over 170 Ulfberht swords have been found, though only about a third are genuine. The rest are medieval counterfeits. Authentic Ulfberht blades are extraordinary, flexible yet hard, capable of shearing through lesser weapons. Warriors treated them as treasures, naming them, being buried with them. The steel likely came from India or Central Asia along the Silk Road. But here's the mystery. How did medieval European smiths recognize this superior foreign steel, understand how to work it without ruining its properties? High-carbon steel becomes brittle if heated wrong, and develop techniques surpassing anything their contemporaries could make. When the original tradition ended around 1000 CE, the knowledge vanished. Later swords bearing Ulfberht are forgeries, made with inferior materials by smiths who remembered the name was legendary but no longer knew the secret. That's an Ulfberht sword, industrial-grade steel in Viking hands. A weapon proving technology can move backward as easily as forward. Number 7. Lycurgus cup. Hold this cup to the light and witness impossible Roman glass that changes color. Opaque jade green in reflected light, but glowing ruby red when light shines through from behind. This 4th century CE Roman cage cup baffled scientists for 1,600 years, until electron microscopy revealed that Roman glassmakers had created nanotechnology. Colloidal gold and silver particles, precisely 70 nanometers in diameter. The glass contains tiny particles of gold-silver alloy, 70% gold, 30% silver, at precisely 70 nanometers. At this exact scale, they interact with light through surface plasmon resonance, the same principle used in modern nanophotonics and pregnancy tests, technology we only developed in the late 20th century. Here's the impossible part. Achieving this effect requires controlling particle size to within 10 nanometers. Modern labs use computer-controlled processes and electron microscopes. Roman glassmakers had none of these, yet somehow knew specific amounts of ground gold and silver, mixed into molten glass at specific temperatures, would create this effect. We've found no other examples of Roman dichroic glass, no experiments, no failed attempts, no learning curve. Just this one perfect cup, suggesting either knowledge was so rare only one workshop possessed it, or other examples haven't survived. That's the Lycurgus cup, nanotechnology from an empire that couldn't see atoms, a quantum physics demonstration from craftsmen who didn't know what light was. Number 6. Antikythera Mechanism. Imagine discovering a bronze computer from 100 BCE pulled from an ancient shipwreck, a device that could predict eclipses, track the Olympics, model the moon's irregular orbit, and display planetary positions through at least 30 meshing bronze gears, some with teeth requiring microscopic precision. Discovered in 1901, it sat in museums for decades, dismissed as too complex to be genuine. But X-ray analysis revealed the truth. This was a sophisticated computer calculating celestial bodies with astonishing accuracy. The front dial displayed the zodiac and Egyptian calendar. Back dials tracked the 19-year Metonic cycle, predicted eclipses using the 223-month Saros cycle, and even modeled the moon's elliptical orbit using mechanisms that wouldn't be invented again until medieval Islamic astronomy. The mechanism required precision gear cutting that historians didn't believe existed until the Renaissance, differential gears not supposed to be invented until the 18th century, and astronomical knowledge that should have been lost with the Library of Alexandria. The most alarming question: If Greeks could build this in 100 BCE, what else could they build? Were there libraries of such devices? Workshops creating computational tools we can't imagine? And why did the technology vanish so completely that medieval scholars had to rediscover basic gears from scratch? That's the Antikythera Mechanism, a computer from an age that shouldn't have computers. Proof that ancient minds could rival modern engineering. Number 5. Stradivarius varnish. Close your eyes and imagine a violin so perfect its sound transcends physics. Notes that bloom with richness modern instruments cannot match. Antonio Stradivari created approximately 1,100 instruments. Around 650 survive, each selling for millions, not because of age, but because no modern luthier can recreate their sound. The secret lies primarily in the varnish. Under microscopic analysis, the coating reveals impossible complexity. Multiple translucent layers, each with different optical and acoustic properties, applied with precision suggesting either genius or lost systematic knowledge. The varnish enhances certain frequencies while dampening others, creating the characteristic sound, bright yet warm, powerful yet nuanced. Modern chemistry has identified some components: oil varnish, Venice turpentine, traces of aluminum, silicon, calcium, potassium, perhaps ground glass or volcanic ash. But knowing ingredients isn't knowing the recipe. The ratios, application techniques, aging processes, mysterious pre-treatments. What's most haunting? Stradivari had apprentices and sons who continued his workshop, yet the complete method still vanished. Perhaps the master himself didn't realize which steps were crucial. Or the varnish required materials available in the 17th century Italy, but since changed: wood from the Little Ice Age, resins from shifted insect populations, minerals from depleted sources. That's Stradivarius varnish. Chemistry that sounds like music. Proof not all knowledge can be written down. Number 4. Greek fire. Imagine a substance that burns on water, clings like napalm, cannot be extinguished. A liquid flame that terrified armies and turned naval battles into floating infernos. This is Greek fire, the Byzantine Empire's most closely guarded secret weapon. A chemical formula so devastating, its complete composition died with the empire. For 7 centuries, Byzantine warships dominated through bronze siphons, spewing streams of fire that turned wooden fleets into pyres. Contemporary accounts describe enemy sailors leaping into the sea to escape, only to find the water itself burning around them. The Byzantines deployed Greek fire at Constantinople in 674 and 717 CE, turning back massive Arab fleets and arguably saving European Christianity from conquest. The formula was guarded more carefully than any crown jewel. The Kallinikos family passed knowledge only to the emperor's most trusted officials. Operators were sworn to secrecy on pain of death. Byzantine emperors refused to share even with closest allies, believing it was a divine gift to protect the empire. Modern chemists have created plausible reconstructions using petroleum, quicklime, sulfur, and naphtha that burn on water, but none perfectly match historical descriptions. A liquid that could be pumped through narrow tubes without premature ignition, that burned intensely enough to ignite wet wood, that could be projected in a controlled stream. The Byzantines themselves eventually lost the formula. By the 13th century, as the empire fragmented, the knowledge scattered. Some believe the last masters died during the Fourth Crusade's sack of Constantinople in 1204. That's Greek fire, a weapon so effective even its creators feared it. A formula lost not to time, but to secrecy, that ultimately guaranteed its extinction. Number 3. Roman concrete. Picture the Pantheon's dome spanning 142 feet of open space, still standing after 1,900 years. No steel reinforcement, just Roman concrete that has actually grown stronger with time. Now picture our modern highways cracking after mere decades. The Romans built harbors, aqueducts, and monuments with concrete that modern engineers cannot replicate, a material that laughs at salt water and environmental stresses destroying our structures within a century. The formula sounds simple. Volcanic ash from Naples called pozzolana, mixed with lime and seawater, combined with volcanic rock. But this simplicity is illusion. Roman maritime concrete undergoes a rare chemical reaction where volcanic ash reacts with seawater to create crystals that actually grow over time, filling cracks and making structures progressively stronger. Our concrete slowly weakens, theirs slowly heals itself. The Romans built their harbor at Portus by pouring concrete directly into seawater, something modern engineers said was impossible until we studied Roman structures and realized they'd been doing it for centuries. Marcus Vitruvius wrote about volcanic ash properties in his treatise, but his descriptions are frustratingly vague, lacking specific ratios and procedures. Marine archaeologists studying Roman harbor installations have found concrete that is not just intact but still chemically active, still forming new crystalline bonds 2,000 years after it was poured. Modern attempts have come close, but none exactly replicate the longevity and self-healing properties. The most alarming truth: our modern Portland cement produces about 8% of global CO2 emissions. Roman concrete actually absorbs CO2 through its ongoing pozzolanic reaction. We replaced a superior, sustainable technology with an inferior, environmentally destructive one because we lost the knowledge and never bothered to seriously study what the Romans achieved until the 21st century. That's Roman concrete, a monument to the hubris of modernity. Proof that newer doesn't always mean better. Number 2. Damascus steel. Imagine a blade that ripples like water frozen mid-flow, its surface alive with patterns that shift in the light. This is Damascus steel, and no modern forge has successfully recreated it. The blades produced between 300 and 1700 CE weren't just beautiful, they were supernaturally sharp, capable of slicing through European swords and remaining sharp after cutting through bone, wood, and armor. Warriors spoke of Damascus blades that could bisect a falling silk scarf and cleave stone moments later. The secret lies in forging Wootz steel, ultra-high carbon steel from India, in ways we still don't understand. Modern metallurgists discovered that Damascus steel contains carbon nanotubes and cementite nanowires, structures that wouldn't be discovered until the 21st century. Yet ancient smiths were creating them in open forges. The distinctive pattern results from carbide bands at the molecular level, but how smiths achieved this without understanding chemistry remains a profound mystery. For centuries, crusaders brought tales of magical swords. When Indian trade routes were disrupted in the 18th century, and specific ore sources were exhausted or forgotten, the knowledge died with the last masters. Modern attempts have produced similar-looking patterns, but none achieve the combination of flexibility, edge retention, and legendary sharpness. In 2006, materials scientists finally identified those carbon nanotubes, structures that shouldn't be possible to create in forges, reaching only 1,000 degrees Celsius, far below temperatures modern labs require. Some researchers now believe the smiths knew exactly what they were doing, that specific hammering patterns, cooling rates, and secret additions were deliberately engineered to create molecular structures they couldn't see but could feel in the blade's performance. That's Damascus steel, beautiful, deadly, and humbling. A reminder that technology isn't just about understanding, sometimes it's about intuition. refined over generations, knowledge that lives in the hands rather than textbooks. Number 1. The Baghdad Battery. In 1936, railway workers near Baghdad uncovered clay jars dating to 250 BCE, each containing a copper cylinder sealed with asphalt, inside which was an iron rod suspended without touching the copper. When examined, archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig proposed something radical. These were galvanic cells, primitive batteries capable of generating electrical current 2 millennia before Alessandro Volta. The construction is precisely matched to battery design. A clay jar containing a copper cylinder with edges rolled inward, sealed with asphalt, with an iron rod suspended down the center, insulated from the copper. Fill this with an electrolyte solution, vinegar, acidic juice, salt water, and it creates a galvanic reaction generating 1 to 2 volts. Multiple jars in series could generate higher voltages. Every properly assembled replica generates measurable voltage. Mythbusters built 10 and connected them in series, generating enough to electroplate a small object. German engineer Arne Eggebrecht demonstrated they could be used for electrogilding, depositing thin gold layers onto objects, producing uniform coating that would explain the remarkably even gold plating on certain Parthian artifacts. But here's the profound mystery. If these were batteries, why is there no other evidence of electrical knowledge in Parthian civilization? No texts describing shocks? No artwork depicting their use? No intermediate technologies? The batteries appear fully formed with no archaeological context explaining their purpose. Yet, if they were simply storage containers, why the precise construction? And how could craftsmen repeatedly build these without noticing electrochemical reactions, bubbles forming, metal surfaces changing, tingling sensations, hydrogen gas generation? Even accidental activation by filling with wine would create noticeable effects. The most disturbing possibility? The Baghdad batteries represent a discovery on the cusp, a technology that could have led somewhere but didn't, either because discoverers didn't recognize full implications or knowledge remained too confined, or practical applications were too limited. How many other near discoveries litter the archaeological record? Objects we don't recognize because they represent dead-end innovations? That's the Baghdad battery, either the most remarkable technological discovery of the ancient world or proof that discovery and understanding are not the same thing, and that humanity might have brushed against electrical technology 2,000 years ago without quite grasping what we'd found. From batteries that might have generated electricity in Parthian hands, to Damascus steel containing molecular structures we didn't discover for another millennium, to Roman concrete that improves with age, these 15 technologies share a humbling truth. Human ingenuity has often exceeded human understanding, and progress is not a straight line, but a chaotic path with dead ends, lost knowledge, and forgotten brilliance. What strikes me most is not that these technologies were possible, but that they were lost. Each loss represents not just a formula, but an entire ecosystem of knowledge. The masters and apprentices, the trade networks, the cultural contexts that valued these innovations, the systematic training producing craftsmen capable of working at the edge of possibility. These lost technologies teach us that not all knowledge can be written down, that some sophistication lives only in practiced hands and trained eyes, in intuition built over lifetimes. When we lose the people who hold that knowledge, when we disrupt apprenticeship systems, when we assume new methods mean we don't need old ones, we risk losing capabilities we may never recover. The question these technologies leave us with is, what are we losing right now? What crafts are dying as their last masters retire? What techniques are vanishing as traditional methods are replaced? What knowledge are we failing to preserve because we assume it's obsolete? These 15 ancient technologies are warnings and invitations. warnings that progress can reverse, that knowledge can die, and invitations to approach our ancestors with humility, to study what they achieved with wonder, to preserve traditional knowledge before it vanishes, and to remember that sometimes the wisest thing we can do is learn from those who came before, because they might have known something we've forgotten.